Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host beside me, Anthony Rivardo. If you're new to the channel, which I imagine most of you are not at this point in time, the Giants just finished their 2022 draft class, and we're pretty hyped. We're going to kind of go through the day 3 picks today. Tomorrow we'll grade the entire draft, and then we're going to go through comprehensive breakdowns and analysis of each individual player. So you guys will really get all of the information you need to kind of properly evaluate these players. It's a little too soon for us to really give each individual guy a grade. But we do want to take kind of an overview, kind of look at the day 3 picks, which guys stood out to us, which ones could end up being steals in this draft class, a couple of names that we didn't expect. But overall, I thought that they did a pretty good job on day 3. They got some really talented players who can contribute immediately, Anthony. Before we dive into the day 3 picks, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Of course, we all know day 1, the Giants absolutely crushed it. They looked like they could potentially be the biggest winners of the 2022 NFL draft. Day 2, a little rocky. There was a lot of, controversy surrounding the Wan'Dale Robinson selection, the guard that they got out of North Carolina. Everyone was like, okay, not the best day, but now day 3 seems like the Giants got themselves back on the horse and they got back to work because there's a couple of names that they drafted today, really solid prospects with a chance to develop into potential starters on day 3. So really happy with the way that the Giants were able to wrap up their 2022 first round or their 2022 draft class. Of course, the first draft that Joe Schoen has done with the New York Giants. Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen stepping in, new regime, new team, new schemes, everything. Really like this draft class. I'm excited to grade it in the coming days and dive in a little bit deeper. But day 3, I'm pretty happy with what the Giants were able to manage.
Yeah, and if you guys have been following us for a little while, I really wanted the Giants to take Jeremy Ruckert out of OSU. Of course, the Jets got him. Jets continuing their great rebuild. Honestly, I think the Jets are rebuilding at an unbelievable pace, and they're doing a really great job putting together a foundation where they're going to be good for the future. And hopefully the Giants can mimic something similar. But instead of Jeremy Ruckert, the Giants went out and drafted San Diego State tight end Daniel Bellinger. And Bellinger is Bellinger is a really interesting player, right? He stands at 6'5" and 253 pounds. This past season, he tallied 353 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, 11.4 yards per catch. And when you look at Bellinger, he is literally like the epitome of a run blocking monster tight end. He's dominant in run blocking. The Giants really haven't had great blocking tight ends over the past couple seasons. Yes, Levine Toilolo offered that, but this guy Bellinger is a much better athlete and a much better receiver. And to give you a little idea of how good of a receiver he is, he did not drop a single pass in 2021, over 43 targets, and he has a career 4.2% drop rate. So after Evan Ingram's plagued us over the past 5 years with routine drops, now we get a tight end who has the capacity to catch the football, which is kind of nice. Dude has really, really big hands, 11-inch hands, 99th percentile there, 82nd percentile in his 40-yard dash. He's pretty solid straight line speed. I think he ran a 4.62. So overall, this guy's a physical specimen. He's athletically gifted. The San Diego State Aztecs did not really utilize him correctly in the passing game. They used him a lot more as a run blocker. He is known for that. He even said after the Giants got him, my strength is run blocking, but I'm going to go out there and do whatever it's got. He kind of gives me Travis Kelce vibes with the way he talks. If you watch his interview, it's really funny. He kind of sounds like a cool guy, but I do think that he could be one of the steals of the draft for the Giants. And not a lot of people were looking at him, but he has the body and the frame to be a phenomenal possession receiver. He has some good speed, big frame, and he's a hell of a blocker. So I think this ultimately could be one of those low key picks that end up panning out big time for the Giants. Anthony, what is your first initial impression of Bellinger?
Yeah, I really like this draft selection. As you mentioned, his strength is his run blocking, and that's kind of where he starts off. Baseline talent is already there. Now it's just about developing him as a receiver. And there's a lot to develop, but there's already a really solid amount of talent there. I really like Daniel Bellinger. I think this is a great pick. If you watch some of these, clips on Twitter or whatever, or if you go watch some film and you see the way that he was used in that offense, it does kind of remind me, you just mentioned Travis Kelce because of his personality. It does kind of remind me of the way that Travis Kelce is used in the Kansas City offense. I'm seeing a few tight end screens, a few tight end swing passes, a couple, fade routes in the end zone, which is a staple for every tight end. But I'm seeing some plays where Daniel Bellinger is catching passes in the backfield and taking them upfield, which is something that, Mike Kafka, of course, knows how to coach Travis Kelce. He did that all the time. Plays like that were a staple in the Kansas City Chiefs offense over the past few years with Travis Kelce. It's one of the reasons that Travis Kelce has developed into arguably the best tight end in the NFL. His usage in that offense is superb, and he's got the ability to run after the catch, and they like to throw him screen passes. So seeing a couple of these clips where Daniel Bellinger is catching some passes in the backfield behind line of scrimmage, on screens and swings, I think that stuff is really interesting. It might give us a glimpse as to what Mike Kafka's plans might be for Daniel Bellinger, knowing that he's coming over from Kansas City. But I really like what he brings to the table. Very willing blocker. He's got good speed. He can threaten on crossing routes and everything. He's really sure-handed, as you mentioned. Didn't drop a pass in 2021 on 42 targets and 31 receptions. Only a 4.2% drop rate for his entire career. I'll say, though, he does have a very short average depth of target, so he was never really used as a vertical threat. This is not your seam breaker, your cover two breaker. This is not that type of tight end. This is your underneath, sure-handed, blocking tight end. Like, this is a well-rounded, all-around guy that can kind of make an impact on both facets of the game. But I think that he can do that really well. This is a guy that I think can develop into a starter. Maybe isn't a day one starter. He might have to be, considering the state of the Giants roster right now. But Daniel Bellinger, really solid day three prospect that I think the Giants just stole in this draft.
Yeah, the more I see the Giants kind of starting to formulate a personnel grouping on this offensive side, the more I get the sense that they're not really going to be like a downfield centric team. Like you said, depth of target for Bellinger is very short. He's a really great security blanket underneath, which is where Evan Ingram struggled significantly. I think Daniel Jones is really going to like Bellinger if he ends up getting some starting reps, because he is shorthanded. He can throw those fastballs in the middle of the field, and he's going to haul them and he's going to catch those balls. So I think that's a really good sign for the Giants. Then you look at, Wan'Dale Robinson, another short kind of screen pass, bubble screen kind of guy. Kadarius Toney, elite slant runner. Like, it's a lot of short route concepts that these receivers and tight ends are really great at. So I wonder if they're kind of run this like spread hybrid West Coast offense, where they're kind of spreading out their formations, but a lot of the route concepts will be shorter to intermediate. So I'm really curious to see how they build this offense. It's going to be fun to watch them kind of piece it together over the next couple months. But the next player on the docket, and actually before I move on to Dane Belton, interesting thing that Bellinger did say is that he watches a lot of George Kittle film, and he tries to mimic his game after George Kittle. So a damn good player to to try and mimic. But Dane Belton, interesting player out of Iowa, safety. 6'1", 205 pounds. He's projected as an average backup special teamer, but I think he has a little bit more upside than that. He's fast, ran a 4.43, so he's got some good speed to him. This is a guy who I think is a good tackler. He can man up on tight ends. He's physical. He has a couple of really good, tangible traits. And he has some versatility. So he kind of featured in this, like, what they call like hybrid cash role, according to Lance Zierlein in the Iowa defense. So he does have some versatility to his game. He can man up against tight ends. He can drop back into the deeper portions of the field as a deep free safety. But I do think that this guy, while mostly kind of developmental, has the versatility and athletic traits and man coverage that the Giants do like in stopping tight ends. So maybe they'll make him like a specific like tight end man coverage stopper. So this could be interesting. I wonder what they're going to try and do with him. But Anthony, what's your first impression of Dane Belton?
Yeah, first impression of Dane Belton, good coverage guy, good safety. Taking a look at what PFF has to say as well. Belton was the 8th best safety and the 112th best player on PFF's big board, which provides some good value for the Giants at where they selected him. So they say that they had a good value pick there. Last season, Belton received a 70-plus or a defensive grade in 7 of his 14 games. He will likely be a work in progress, but he could be a solid addition in a few years. So basically, developmental guy in the secondary, which is what the Giants need. They need some guys in the secondary. They need some depth in the secondary at the very least, and now they have that with Dane Belton. And this is a guy that I think that they could develop into being a free safety one day. I think he's got the coverage skills to be a free safety. If you take a look at his grades on PFF, and if you take a look at the way he plays, he kind of ball hawks as a safety. Taking a look as well at his athleticism. Iowa's Dane Belton is PFF's 7th-ranked safety. He's expected to go in the 4th round, and his relative athletic score on the tweet was a 9.42 overall. His composite size grade was good, his explosion grade was good, but his speed grade was elite. He ran a 4.43 40-yard dash with a 1.49 10-yard split, which is really solid. So he ranked really highly amongst all of the safeties in this class in terms of his athleticism at the combine, which you always like to see when you're talking about developing guys. You want athletes to develop. you want them to be coachable. And Dane Belton has athleticism. He has speed. He is very coachable. And as I mentioned, high coverage grade, 82.3 coverage grade in 2021, fourth among Big Ten safeties, according to PFF. And I really like what he's able to do in coverage. Again, he's kind of a ball hawk. I see a play where he had this interception. He kind of was playing in the slot, which is something that I read about him as well, that he kind of plays that hybrid role, plays some free safety, gets down in the slot. I was looking at this play where he kind of baited the quarterback into throwing this in route because he kind of faked out and then he just jumped it on the inside, and it was a really nice play there. So kind of like an instincty ball hawking free safety is what I think that he could develop into. Of course, as you mentioned, probably starting off on special teams just to get his feet wet in the NFL, but I do think this is a player that the Giants could develop into a pretty solid contributor on the defensive side of the ball in just a couple of years.
Yeah, so like something I noticed about the Giants draft class kind of after the first round is a lot of their picks were scheme fits, right? After the first round, they were like Kayvon Thibodeau, scheme fit. He is a scheme fit, but I don't think like that was what necessarily what they were going for. And then Evan Neal, obviously just the kind of best player available approach. But day 2 and day 3, they really went after scheme fits. Like, Robinson in the second round, like a very much a scheme fit. They even went as far as to say as much as he's going to fit our offense perfectly. A lot of these guys, Micah McFadden's another one. We're going to talk about him right now. Micah McFadden, linebacker out of Indiana, is an aggressive blitz heavy linebacker. He fits Wink Martindale's system to perfection. 6'1", 240 pounds. I think he could end up starting alongside Blake Martinez. Blake Martinez can kind of play this hybrid role, just kind of soak up those tackles on the back end and let Micah McFadden just play this inside linebacker, just blitzing all the time. From the middle, from the kind of that inside linebacker position. So I think that could be really interesting. And the thing is, he is a scheme fit player. Other teams that play more zone coverage would require him to be, more dropping back into coverage. I think that ultimately they wouldn't go after him. But because of Wink Martindale's style and scheme, I think he targeted Micah McFadden specifically. And, he's also another guy that has a lot of intangibles. He's a 2-year captain. The dude is a freaking unit. He's muscled out of his mind. He's pretty smart when it comes to being aggressive. His weaknesses listed are well built, but his size is below average, but he's well built. Lacked confidence and decisiveness in big games. So he is a captain, but maybe just didn't lack the decisiveness when it comes to those big contests. Limited range to roam outside the box. So he's a box linebacker. Like, you want him in there being aggressive and blitzing a lot. So I wonder if that's kind of how they will use him, kind of incorporate him slowly into the scheme, see if he can kind of steal reps away from Tate Crowder. I imagine there'll be probably a competition there. With Tate Crowder kind of getting the start to open the year, but I wonder if McFadden quickly finds his way in on the early downs, and then Tate Crowder maybe transitions to like a third down linebacker alongside Blake Martinez. So really interested to see how the Giants kind of utilize Micah McFadden, but I think he could end up making an impact as a rookie.
Yeah, I could see him making an impact as a rookie, especially in this rotational pass rushing scheme that Wink Martindale loves to run. We know Wink Martindale loves to run a blitz heavy defense. And I think Micah McFadden, as you mentioned, perfect scheme fit. Even Zach Rosenblatt described this as a Wink pick through and through, and I totally see that. This guy is going to fit perfectly into what Wink Martindale is trying to do defensively. If you take a look at what PFF has to say about him, they've got some good things. They're going to say he played 121 snaps as a true freshman before taking over as a full-time starting linebacker as a sophomore in 2019. He earned an 81.9 pass rushing grade that season and has only seen it go up in the 2 subsequent years. In 2021, his 92.0 pass rushing grade led the entire country in the off-ball linebacker position. So really great stats there. He's very fast as well. If you take a look at his relative athletic score, 9.43, 40-yard dash was 4.63, which is pretty solid, but his 10-yard split was really elite at 1.54 seconds, and that does show up. If you take a look at some of Micah McFadden's film, you see him come screaming through the gaps. He plays the quarterback spy role extremely well, too. He'll kind of just wait, and then boom, there you see that 10-yard split. 10 yards, he's at the quarterback. His pursuit is incredible. His closing speed is elite. And those are the things that, again, looking at how he might fit into the scheme, Alex, you mentioned that a lot of these picks are really scheme-dependent picks. They really just fit right into the scheme. Micah McFadden fits perfectly into this blitz-heavy scheme that Wink Martindale loves to run. He's a really good pass rusher, and he's got great closing speed, good instincts. I really like Micah McFadden. I think this was another great selection by the Giants in the middle rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next player the Giants went after was DJ Davidson. So DJ Davidson's really interesting. I did not really know much about him, but I started to read up on him and kind of take a look. He's this kind of a developmental defensive tackle out of Arizona State, 6'3", 327 pounds. He's a big guy. This is the kind of guy you just are bringing in basically to help stop the run on early downs. He is a pure run stopping defensive tackle. He does not offer much as a pass rusher. The Giants, after letting Austin Johnson go and Danny Shelton, they needed someone at defensive tackle, and ultimately, I think they're kind of like, okay, let's go get DJ Davidson. He can plug the gaps and really offer us a lot of value in run defense in the early downs. So I think that's kind of how they see him. The strengths range from impressive width. He's a really big, wide guy, good lateral quickness to challenge reach blocks, pops and shoves blockers to gain early traction. So some of his weaknesses could afford to turn some bad weight into good weight, so maybe a little bit more muscle mass. But at the NFL level, I think he'll have a little bit better diet and workout regimen. So I think ultimately, when you're looking at him, this was clearly another plug and play, like scheme fit related thing. They needed a defensive tackle, and they were like, okay, we can easily find one that can serve a specific purpose in the 6th round. And I think they kind of found their guy. Anthony, what do you think about DJ Davidson?
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts on DJ Davidson. He's kind of a really unknown player in my eyes because he's kind of very low on a lot of draft boards. If you take a look at what PFF had to say about the pick, you can go over there. They graded this pick as poor because Davidson was the 307th ranked player on the PFF big board, and the Giants took him at 147. Out of the 23 defensive interior linemen that they had on their big board, he ranked 22nd out of 23. He earned a 77.7 run defense grade and top tier 11.3 run stop rate in 2021. So, as you mentioned, Alex, this is a pure run stuffing nose tackle, which again, the Giants did need. This seems like they were kind of at a position in this draft where they needed to get a nose tackle, so they just took the best one that they had available. So it's kind of just plug and play. They had a need, they filled the need, and DJ Davidson, whether or not he ends up being the starter will remain to be foreseen, but maybe he can develop into a starter one day. At the very least, though, this is a big run-stuffing nose tackle. He claims in his interview that he also has the ability to play the 3-tech. I don't think the Giants would ever ask him to do that. They have Dexter Lawrence, they have Leonard Williams. Those are their 3-techs right there. But when you take a look at DJ Davidson, he is a nose tackle. He can be your 0 up front, just line up over the center and hopefully stuff the run. He was very good at stuffing the run over at Arizona State, so hopefully he can develop into a decent run stuffing nose tackle for the Giants.
Yep, that's what we're really going for. And the next guy on the list, another UNC player. The Giants went out and got Marcus McKethan, offensive guard. So the Giants have now signed and drafted a combined 9 offensive linemen. 9 offensive linemen. This dude, another big ass human being, 6'6", 340 pounds. This dude is an absolute hog in the middle of the field, and just in the middle of your offensive line. He's a developmental guy, but clearly the Giants, who had a lot of people at the UNC Pro Day, liked some of those players, and I think this was one of them. So he's a 3-year starter, offers premium size and length of the guard position, plays to his size with the ability to mash and move single blocks and double teams. He's best suited for gap and power schemes, but will struggle against moving fronts that force him to react quickly to action in his gaps. But he's just an enormous guy. Like, he's just a body with solid athleticism. And ultimately, when you're talking about developmental pieces, you just want to find big athletic people, human beings that you can coach. And getting him in the 6th round or 5th round, I think they got him in the 5th round. So pick 30 in the 5th round. Huge guy. And I think this is someone you just develop and you say, okay, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism to play offensive guard, and maybe he ends up being an average backup, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to have good backups too. So Anthony, what's your first impression of Marcus McKethan?
Yeah, first impression, mammoth of a human being, just a huge guy, has the ability to play tackle, has the ability to play guard. I think there's a lot of value to be had with a player of that caliber, that versatility, especially when you're talking about a depth piece, as you just mentioned. Maybe he'll just be a really good backup. Well, if he's able to be a really good backup and he has the ability to play 2 positions, then he's a really good backup. So I really like that. That's something that I've always valued with linemen taken in the middle to late rounds, the fact that some of them are versatile enough to play more than one position, which just means they're more valuable. They can do more as a backup. His pass blocking grade was an 86.3 this past season, a really high metric there by PFF. His run blocking grade was a 71.8. He graded out really well according to PFF. if you really put stock into the PFF grades. He has 35.5-inch arms, but he's not extremely explosive, and his agility testing was not the best. But one thing that he does have is a lot of experience. He has over 2,500 career snaps played, and he did earn a very solid grade in those snaps. Played right guard at UNC this past season. Taking a look at his relative athletic score, he is extremely slow. He did run a 5.3 140-yard dash. His shuttle time was extremely poor at a 4.99. But in terms of his size and his strength, he put up 27 bench reps. He is 6'6". He is 340 pounds. Those things are all good, and he can actually jump pretty well with a 9.9 foot 2-inch broad jump. So he's got some explosion in his lower half there as well. But I like what he brings to the table, again, as you mentioned, Alex, as a developmental backup that can play more than one position, right guard, offensive tackle, can kind of just move around and develop there. And that's what the Giants needed. Like, thank God we we have a general manager who is now emphasizing the offensive line. The Giants drafted 3 offensive linemen, 1 in the first round, of course, and a couple more in the middle rounds. That's what you love to see. Some of these guys, they're not going to hit. Inevitably, they're not. They're just going to be backups, or maybe they won't even make the team. But some of them will hit. One day, if the Giants keep throwing darts at the dartboard, they're going to hit on a mid to late round offensive lineman. The problem with Dave Gettleman's tenure is he didn't even do that. He never drafted offensive linemen in the middle to late rounds. When he did, his evaluations were pretty poor. I know Shane Lemieux, Matt Parrott, that's a 3rd and a 5th round pick. But what happened in 2021, right? 0 offensive linemen
coaching.
Exactly. Bad coaching as well. There's been a lot of problems with the Giants in the past, but one thing that we can say, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, looks like they're putting a heavy emphasis on fixing the offensive line. So taking a chance on a prospect like this in the later rounds, back end of the 5th round, I can't really complain too much about that.
Yeah, we have a lot of content coming up, guys, in terms of projecting the offensive line, taking a look at each individual player. There's so much to go through now after the draft. I'm really excited to begin to dive into each individual player in the position groups, because that's kind of where we're headed. And there's a lot of new talent on this roster, so it's going to be exciting. But the last player the Giants picked in the 2022 NFL draft was Darion Beavers out of Cincinnati. This guy actually might end up being one of the steals of the draft for the Giants too, along with Bellinger. So Darion Beavers allowed 0 touchdowns in coverage during his entire collegiate career. He's a linebacker. So interesting player here. He had 4 sacks last season, 11 tackles for loss, and 98 total tackles. A lot of people had him even in the top 100 of their draft board. The Giants got him at 182. He also forced 2 fumbles. If you look at his statistics alone, he looks like a stud, right? He looks like a really great player just from his stats. 6'3", 242 pounds. He could end up being an influential special teams guy to start his career. But if he develops nicely, and I think he has some really great upside, he could end up being a starting level player on the Giants in the future. Decent enough to play coverage. He's a big, strong, and physical linebacker. I think it's going to take him some time. We're looking at least a year of development before I trust him as a potential starter. But look at Tay Crowder. The guy was getting starting snaps, and he was Mr. Irrelevant in this. And Beavers was picked a whole round before, even 2 rounds almost before Beavers, or rather before Crowder. So I really am intrigued to see how he develops, if Joe Shane and this new defensive core, if coaches can really get the most out of him. So, looking at him athletically, seems like a really good player, inside linebacker. They got a couple of linebackers to develop now with McFadden and Beavers. So excited to see what they offer, kind of compete for that second LB2 spot alongside Blake Martinez, Anthony. But what is your initial impression of Darion Beavers? I kind of feel like that might be an underrated pick for the Giants.
I definitely think it is an underrated pick. If you take a look at the draft boards and you take a look at what people are saying on Twitter, I saw one draft analyst say this was a 90th ranked player on my draft board, and the Giants just stole him at 182. So really tremendous value there according to that guy's draft board. And then you also go over to PFF. PFF says they had a 4th round grade on him. Giants absolutely stole him in the back end of the 6th round. So don't really know how this player slipped through the cracks and fell that far in the draft, but I know that I'm happy and the Giants are happy too to get a guy like this. Really great explosion. He does have a area to improve, which is tackling. He has a 16.5% career miss rate on tackles, but he plays with a lot of power. PFF lists him as one of the best stack shed linebackers in the class, lowers a boom downhill. Loose athlete that can sink into contact, gives him a number of ways to beat blocks. long frame with ideal musculature for the position. Interesting word there, word choice by PFF. But then you also take a look at his relative athletic score, a 9.60, ranking 97 out of 2,419 linebackers from 1987 to 2022. I love taking a look at these relative athletic scores because they really show you what the team might be looking at in terms of athletic development. What kind of athlete are they getting? Can they mold them into a really good football player? And again, another very moldable player here with Beavers, because he's got really good shuttle times and 3 cones. Those were all elite. So very agile. He's got great explosion, and his height is some of the top at his position. So this is a guy who has a really long frame, has some good power, a lot of agility, never allowed a touchdown coverage, as you mentioned, Alex. He could improve in his tackling, but he lays the boom when he does make the tackle, and he also has the ability to shed some blocks and contribute as a pass rusher. I like, once again, the Giants found another good pass rushing off-ball linebacker, perfect scheme fit for the Wink Martindale defensive scheme. And I think that's exactly what the Giants were trying to accomplish here on day 3. They just wanted to get a lot of developmental guys, good athletes that they know can plug right into the schemes that they're trying to implement, and hopefully develop them one day to be solid starters or solid backups and contributors. Really like what they did on day 3. And I think we got a lot of good scheme fits through the backgrounds of the 2022 NFL draft.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people out there that are very upset about some of these picks, and I think mainly because they make the argument that there were better players on the board, like for example Sky Moore. That's a reasonable argument to make. I love Sky Moore; he's one of my favorite players. Shifty as hell, maybe even probably better immediately than Robinson. The Chiefs got one and got Moore, and I think he's going to be a stud for them. But ultimately, what the Giants did is they did not go with the best player available approach after the first round. They went with a scheme fit approach after the first round. So you have to keep that in mind. Their strategy was not what a lot of people thought it was going to be. Their strategy was very, very, very specific to positions and what they were looking for in those specific positions and what types of players they wanted, character-wise and physical-wise. So I think that we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of times coaches and general managers have differing opinions on this. They'll say, we just want the best player available, and then we'll have them mold. But I think that it kind of goes in line with what Brian Daboll has done in the past and the way that he coaches. He tries to fit the scheme to player strengths. So why not draft that way too? You know what I mean? So I feel like it makes sense logically what they did in this draft, and that's why they did skip out on some of those more more notable players and notable names for scheme fits. But I am intrigued to hear your opinions below on this draft class. We will be taking a look at each individual player in the coming days, my friends, so don't worry about that. We'll get you guys with some good film so you can get an idea of what these guys have to offer, and we will grade them below as well. And Anthony, what are you thinking?
Also, keep an eye on some of these undrafted rookies that could be signed up by the Giants. There's a few
Justin
names
Ross,
that are
maybe?
falling. Justin Ross could end up going undrafted. The draft is still taking place while we're recording, and back end of it. Another guy that I want to keep an eye on, let's see if he falls out of the draft, Marquise Hayes. I've seen that he could go undrafted, a guard out of Oklahoma that I
Skylar
really like.
Thompson.
So, yep, there's a few names out there that the Giants could potentially get active in on the waiver wire. So, of course, the content never stops. We'll always update you guys with that as well, with the undrafted free agents that they might sign. So,
I'll catch you.
it's going to be an exciting time here.
Yep, we got you covered. No worries about that. Always got you covered with all the information and news. But as always, hope you enjoyed this video, my friends. Make sure to drop a like and subscription below if you're interested in seeing more Giants content every single day. We got you guys covered. Never stops. We're not tired of it at all. We're just getting started. Giants finally look like they're turning a corner, some positivity coming our way, and we are all about it. It's about time we enjoyed this process rather than having to restart every single year. But really love you guys for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed the draft as much as we did, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.